Good evening and welcome again to St. John's reading through the Bible. We are on day 57 and we are reading in the book of Judges, starting in chapter 3, verse 7, and we're going to go on to 5, the end of the chapter 5. And we're going to be reading about a couple of different judges. Most of them are ones you may not have heard much about, including Othniel, Ehud, and of course, the prophetess Deborah. So, let's get going. Judges, chapter 3, starting in verse 7. The Israelites did things that the Lord saw as evil, and they forgot the Lord their God. They served the Baals and the Asherahs. The Lord became angry with Israel and gave them over to King Cushan Rishathaim of Aram Naharaim. The Israelites served Cushan 8 years. But then they cried out to the Lord. So the Lord raised up a deliverer for the Israelites, Othniel, Kenaz's son, Caleb's younger brother, who rescued them. The Lord's Spirit was in Othniel, and he led Israel. When he marched out for war, the Lord handed over Aram's king Cushan, and Othniel overpowered Cushan. And the land was peaceful for 40 years, until Othniel, Kenaz's son, died. Verse 12. The Israelites again did things that the Lord saw as evil, and the Lord put Moab's king Eglon in power over them, because they did these things that the Lord saw as evil. He convinced the Ammonites and the Amalekites to join him, defeated Israel, and took possession of Palm City. So the Israelites served Moab's king Eglon for 18 years. Then the Israelites cried out to the Lord. So the Lord raised up a deliverer for them, Ehud, Gera's son, a Benjaminite, who was left-handed. How funny they put that in there. The Israelites sent him to take the tribute payments to Moab's king Eglon. Now Ehud made for himself a double-edged sword that was about 1.5 feet long, and he strapped it on his right thigh under his clothes. Then he presented the tribute payment to Moab's king Eglon, who was a very fat man. When he had finished delivering the tribute payment, Ehud sent them on their way, the people who had carried it. But he himself turned back at the carved stones near Gilgal and said, "I have a secret message for you, king." So Eglon said, "Hush," and all his attendants went out of his presence. He had approached him while he was sitting alone in his cool second-story room. And he said, "I have a message from God for you." At that, Eglon got up from his throne. Ehud reached with his left hand and grabbed the sword from his right thigh. He stabbed it into Eglon's stomach, and even the handle went in after the blade. Since he did not pull the sword out of the stomach, the fat closed over the blade, and the guts spilled out. Ooh. Ehud slipped out of the porch and closed and locked the doors of the second-story room behind him. After Ehud had slipped out, the king's servants came and found that the room's doors were locked. So they thought he must be relieving himself in the cool chamber. They waited so long that they were embarrassed, but he never opened the door of the room. Then they used the key to open them, and there was their master lying dead on the ground. Ehud had gotten away while they were waiting, and he passed the carved stones and escaped to Serah. When he arrived, he blew the ram's horn in the Ephraim highlands. So the Israelites went down from the highlands with Ehud leading them. He told them, "Follow me, for the Lord has handed over your enemies, the Moabites." So they followed him, and they took control of the crossing points of the Jordan in the direction of Moab, allowing no one to cross. This time they defeated the Moabites, about 10,000 big and strong men, and no one escaped. Moab was brought down by the power of Israel on that day, and there was peace in the land for 80 years. After Ehud, Shamgar, Anna's son, struck down 600 Palestinians with an animal prod. He too rescued in Israel. And now into chapter 4. After Ehud had died, the Israelites again did things that the Lord saw as evil. So the Lord gave them over to King Jabin of Canaan, who reigned in Hazor. The commander of his army was Sisera, and he was stationed in Haroseth Hagoyim. The Israelites cried out to the Lord because Sisera had 900 iron chariots and had oppressed the Israelites cruelly for 20 years. Now Deborah, a prophet, the wife of Lapidoth, was the leader of Israel at the time. She would sit under Deborah's palm tree between Ramah and Bethel in the Ephraim highlands, and the Israelites would come to her to settle disputes. She sent word to Barak, Abinoam's son, from Kadesh in Naphtali, and said to him, "Hasn't the Lord, Israel's God, issued you a command? Go and assemble at Mount Tabor, taking 10,000 men from the people of Naphtali and Zebulun with you. I will lure Sisera, the commander of Jabin's army, to assemble with his chariots and troops against you at the Kishon River, and then I'll help you overpower them." Barak replied to her, "If you'll go with me, I'll go, but if not, I won't go." Deborah answered, "I definitely will go with you. However, the path you're taking won't bring honor to you because the Lord will hand Sisera over to a woman." Then Deborah got up and went with Barak to Kadesh. He got up and went, he summoned Zebulun and Naphtali, the tribes, to Kadesh, and 10,000 men marched out behind him. Deborah marched out with them too. Now Heber the Kenite had moved away from the other Kenites, the descendants of Hobab, Moses' father-in-law, and had settled as far away as Elan Bezanim, which is near Kadesh. When it was reported to Sisera that Barak, Abonam's son, had marched up to Mount Tabor, Sisera summoned all of his 900 iron chariots and all the soldiers who were with him from Hasorah Bargoim to the Kishon River. Then Deborah said to Barak, Get up. This is the day that the Lord has handed Sisera over to you. Hasn't the Lord gone out before you?" So Barak went down from Mount Tabor with 10,000 men behind him. The Lord threw Sisera and all his chariots and army into a panic before Barak. Sisera himself got down from his chariot and fled on foot. Barak pursued the chariots and the army all the way back to Haroseth Hagoyim, killing Sisera's entire army with his sword. No one survived. Meanwhile, Sisera had fled on foot to the tent of Jael, the wife of Heber the Kenite, because there was peace between Hazor's king Jabin and the family of Heber the Kenite. Jael went out to meet Sisera and told him, "Come in, sir, come in here. Don't be afraid." So he went with her into the tent, and she hid him under a blanket. Sisera said to her, "Please give me a little water to drink. I'm thirsty." So she opened a jug of milk, gave him a drink, and hid him again. Then he said to her, "Stand at the entrance to the tent. That way, if someone comes and asks, 'Is there a man there?' you can say no." But Jael, Heber's wife, picked up a tent stake and a hammer. While Sisera was sound asleep from exhaustion, she tiptoed to him. She drove this stake through his head and down into the ground, and he died. Just then, Barak arrived after chasing Sisera. Jael went out to meet him and said, "Come, and I'll show you the man you're after." So he went in there, and there was Sisera lying dead with the stake through his head. So on that day, God brought down Canaan's King Jabin before the Israelites, and the power of the Israelites grew greater and greater over Canaan's King Jabin until they defeated him completely. And now we're up to chapter 5, and this is titled Deborah's Song. And the way that it is written Um, Makes me think that it was certainly a song, a chant, in a poetic form. Let's hear it together. Wish we could understand, or wish we knew what the music was like. I'm sure it was beautiful. At the time, Deborah and Barak, Abinoam's son, sang, "When hair is long in Israel, when people willingly offer themselves, bless the Lord. Hear, kings, listen, rulers. I, to the Lord, I will sing. I will make music to the Lord, Israel's God. Lord, when you set out from Seir, when you marched down from Edom's field, the land shook, the sky poured down, the clouds poured down water, the mountains quaked before the Lord, the one from Sinai, before the Lord, the God of Israel. In the days of Shamgar, Anah's son, in the days of Jael, caravans ceased. Those traveling by road kept to the back roads. Villagers disappeared. They disappeared in Israel until you, Deborah, arose, until you arose as a mother in Israel. When they chose new gods, then war came to the city gates. Yet there wasn't a shield or spear to be seen among 40,000 in Israel. My heart is with Israel's commanders, who willingly offer themselves among the people. Bless the Lord. You who ride white donkeys, who sit on saddle blankets, who walk along the road, tell of it. To the sound of instruments at the watering places. There they repeat the Lord's victories. His villagers' victories in Israel. Then the Lord's people marched down to the city gates. Wake up, Deborah, wake up, sing a song. Arise, Barak, capture your prisoner, Abinoam's son. Then those who remained marched down against royalty. The Lord's people marched out against warriors. From Ephraim they sent out into the valley. After you, Benjamin, with your people. From Machir commanders marched down, and from Zebulun those carrying the official's staff. The leaders of Issachar came along with Deborah. Issachar was attached to Barak, and he went into the valley behind him. Among the clans of Reuben, there were deep soul-searching. Why did you stay back among the sheep pens, listening to the music for the flocks? For the clans of Reuben, there was deep soul-searching. Gilead stayed on the other side of the Jordan, and Dan, why did he remain with the ships? Asher stayed by the seacoast, camping by his harbors. Zebulun is a people that readily risk death. Naphtali too, high in the high countryside. Kings came and made war. The kings of Canaan fought at Tamak by Megiddou's waters, but they captured no spoils of silver. The stars fought from the sky. From their orbits they fought against Sisera. The Kishon River swept them away. The advancing river, the Kishon River, march on, my life, with might. Then the horses' hooves pounded with the galloping of their stallions. Curse Meroz, said the Lord's messenger. Curse its inhabitants bitterly, because they didn't come to the Lord's aid against the warriors. May Jael be blessed among all women. May the wife of Heber the Canaanite be blessed above all tent-dwelling women. He asked for water, and she provided milk. She presented him with cream in a majestic bowl. She reached out her hand for the stake, her strong hand for the worker's hammer. She struck Sisera. She crushed his head and shattered and pierced his skull. At her feet he sank, fell, and lay flat. At her feet he fell, he sank. Where he sank, there he fell, dead. Through the window she watched. Sisera's mother looked longingly through the lattice. Why is his chariot taking so long to come? Why are the hoofbeats of his chariot horse delayed? Her wisest attendants answered. Indeed, she replies to herself, wouldn't they be finding and dividing the loot? A girl or two for each warrior? Loot of colored cloths for Sisera. Loot of colored embroidered cloths. 2 colored embroidered cloths as loot for every neck. May all your enemies perish like this, Lord, but may your allies be like the sun, rising in its strength. And the land was peaceful for 40 years. That is the end of today's reading. I'd like to read the commentary by Margaret de Vega on today's reading. He says, the story of Deborah is a timely reminder of God's voice of power and liberation can come from any person, regardless of their background or our expectations of them. All we have to do is listen to them, stay with them, and go with them. Who in your mind is a Deborah for our time? Good question. Deborah was a wise woman. She was a leader that was so wise people listened to her. It didn't matter that she was a woman. Her advice was good and sound. She believed in the Lord, and the people who followed her found their way. And they found their way certainly to victory. She encouraged them. Who's an encourager in your life? Who's someone that's shown you the way? Points the way maybe for others. Those people we should be uplifting, right? Uplifting in our prayers, uplifting with our encouraging words. Just like the song of Deborah might have been sung for many years, reminds me of the songs of the Middle Ages where they would sing about the great battles and the great heroes of the time, right? We remember it best because in a song it's easy to, when we remember the words and the melody, and it's something that keeps going on and on. In that way we can all remember the same thing too, because we remember the same words. So in that way, let us remember the story of Deborah, a wise and brave woman who wasn't afraid to speak out, wasn't afraid to act, wasn't afraid to encourage others to act on the Lord's behalf. Thank you guys for listening. Until next time, blessings to you.